right, so get this. What could a 19th century novel about, the ins and outs of British society possibly have in common with, like, these channeled messages exploring the very nature of reality? It's a wild combo, right? But that's exactly what we do here on the Dub Dive. You give us the sources, and we dive deep, uncovering some pretty surprising connections along the way.
Exactly. And today's deep dive is a doozy. We're taking a look at Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, and at the same time, excerpts from The Law of One.
You guys really threw us a curveball with this one. I mean, on the surface, you've got, on one hand, balls, estates, all that fancy maneuvering in Regency England, and then on the other, bam, cosmic evolution, consciousness. Talk about a contrast.
Right. But that's the fun part. As we really got into these materials, what we found were these really fascinating parallels, offering some seriously fresh perspectives on, the stuff that makes us human, that stuff that's been around forever.
No kidding. So what we're trying to do in this deep dive is dig up those unexpected connections, those points where viewing Austen's world through the lens of the law of one and the other way around can actually give us a deeper understanding of both.
Totally. Like a multidimensional literary kaleidoscope or something.
Okay, so let's start with something that just jumps out at you in Pride and Prejudice.
Mm-hmm.
The whole rigid social hierarchy and how everybody's constantly judging each other based on it, right?
Yeah, Austen lays it out pretty clearly. This society is all about class, wealth, family name. And it's like everyone's constantly sizing each other up based on these external factors. You see it right away with Darcy. He's got this, how do I put it, not so subtle disdain for Elizabeth's family. Doesn't exactly hold back on
Oh,
that.
yeah. And Mrs. Bennet, obsessed with marrying off her daughters to, well, anyone with money and status. I mean, her whole world revolves around security and climbing that social ladder.
It's all about those advantageous matches. And even those big estates like Netherfield and Pemberley, they're not just property. They represent this huge weight of status. They basically determine who's in and who's out.
Totally. Okay, so let's bring in the law of one now. And it's, well, a completely different ballgame, right? What they describe is this idea of reality being structured into these different densities of consciousness. Each density has its own lessons, its own set of characteristics. And they say our current reality, what they call third density, is all about, well, becoming self-aware and making this choice between serving ourselves or serving others.
Right. And within that context, the law of one says judging based on these superficial differences, it's basically an illusion. They call it illusion, born of illusion.
Whoa, okay, so these social barriers and prejudices that are like the backbone of Austen's world, they're not really reflecting a deeper truth about, I don't know, maybe how interconnected we all are. But even though they're illusions in Pride and Prejudice, they have some very real consequences.
Absolutely. But what's interesting is that both sources, each in their own way, they show how limited these snap judgments really are. Like in Pride and Prejudice, Elizabeth at first totally misjudges Darcy. But as she gets to know him, her whole perception of him changes completely.
In Darcy, Mr. Big Pride and Prejudice himself, he also has to, like, reevaluate his views. He sees Elizabeth's intelligence, her independence, stuff he totally missed at the beginning because of her social standing. He even admits that, like, those first judgments about her appearance were totally wrong, that her personality won him over.
And that shift from those initial, often wrong judgments to a deeper understanding, it really lines up with a key idea from the Law of One. And they say recognizing that we don't know everything, that's a crucial step in our spiritual growth. Like acknowledging our limited perspective opens us up to learning, to changing.
Okay, so from social judgments, let's move into something Elizabeth Bennet totally rocks at: personal growth and becoming self-aware.
Oh, absolutely. She's described as distinctly clever, almost strong-minded, which back then made her stand out from most other women. She's not afraid to speak her mind, to challenge the norms. But what's cool is she uses her wit to parry, not to attack. She can give at least as good as she gets, but she's not the one throwing the first punch.
Right, she's got this inner strength that really gets tested throughout the book. Think about when she refuses Darcy's proposal. That's like the peak of the drama. She stands her ground based on her own values, and then later she goes head-to-head with Lady Catherine de Bourgh, who's, let's face it, terrifying. Those are the moments when Elizabeth's true character, her confidence, really shine through.
Okay, so now let's bring in the Law of One again. They talk about something called the mind-body-spirit complex, and they say the key is to understand, experience, accept, and then integrate all these parts of ourselves. And to realize that we're also connected to everyone else. That's how we truly know ourselves, they say. In Elizabeth's journey, it's all about that process of self-discovery, figuring out her biases, her own feelings, all of it.
And the law of one also talks about catalyst. By that, they mean all those experiences, good and bad, that trigger our spiritual growth. They help us see our limitations. And the thing is, all the social stuff, the misunderstandings, even the straight-up conflicts in Pride and Prejudice, they act as these huge catalysts for the characters.
Yeah, think about it. Elizabeth misjudging Darcy, his pride, Wickham's whole act, all these events force them to face their own flaws and grow. They wouldn't be the same without them.
Exactly. Okay, moving on to, well, you can't talk about Austen without talking about love and relationships.
Right.
And Pride and Prejudice gives us a whole spectrum of them.
Totally. You've got Charlotte Lucas, who takes this very practical approach to marriage. Marrying Mr. Collins is like a business decision for her. It's the only honorable provision for a woman in her position. No romance, just practicality. And it really shows you the kind of pressure women were under back then.
Then you've got Elizabeth and Darcy, Jane and Bingley, where true affection actually grows and overcomes those social barriers.
Yeah.
And we can't forget Lydia and Wickham, who are all about that impulsive attraction, and it blows up in their faces. And of course, you've got Mrs. Bennet, who's laser focused on getting her daughters married well. Settlements, carriages, wedding clothes, that's her world.
Now, the Law of One takes a different approach to love and relationships. They say love is the second distortion, like this fundamental desire of the creator to know itself. And they also talk about these ray energy transfers that happen in relationships. Think of them like different focuses of energy. Red is about basic physical attraction. Orange and yellow can be about manipulation and control. Green is universal love. Blue focuses on self-expression. And indigo is this deeper soul level connection.
That's wild. So imagine looking at the relationships in Pride and Prejudice through that law of one lens, like Miss Bingley trying to break up Jane and Bingley because she wants Darcy for herself. The law of one might say she's operating on those more self-serving energy rays, seeing someone as an object, not as an other self, to be respected.
Exactly. The Law of One would say relationships based on manipulation, on pure self-interest, they're less evolved than those based on genuine care, respect, and growing together. Like Elizabeth and Darcy, who eventually connect in a way that feels more like that green ray of universal love.
Right, and that brings us to deception, which is huge in Pride and Prejudice. Elizabeth's prejudice against Darcy, it's fueled by Wickham's lies. And Darcy meddling in Jane and Bingley's relationship, that's because he totally misread Jane. Elizabeth even realizes she was completely taken in by Wickham's charm.
And this is where the Law of One talks about this veiling process that happens in third density. They say that as part of our experience here, our connection to higher consciousness, to past lives, it gets obscured. This veil, it creates a separation between our conscious and unconscious minds. And that leads to forgetting, to misinterpretations, to illusions about ourselves and other people.
So in Pride and Prejudice, it's like the characters are living in this reality where clear perception is almost impossible. They're judging, forming opinions based on incomplete info, societal biases, even straight-up lies. And it reflects this veiled existence the Law of One describes.
Exactly. All the deception and misjudgment, it shows how hard it is to know the truth, to understand people's real intentions when you're in this veiled state. You know, appearances can be deceiving and people hide their true thoughts and feelings.
Okay, last but not least, let's touch on how the Law of One sees reality as a whole and how that might relate, even indirectly, to Pride and Prejudice. So the Law of One, it gives this huge cosmic perspective. It talks about these densities of consciousness, this idea of a harvest of souls as they move through the densities, and about wanderers who are beings from higher densities who come here to help others evolve. They even mention Earth transitioning to fourth density and the challenges we face because of all the scattered thoughts and energy. Oh, and they say third density on Earth started about 75,000 years ago.
Yeah, it's this mind-blowing cosmic view. It puts our individual and societal experiences in this much grander context of evolution. And it does seem pretty far removed from the world of Pride and Prejudice, where everything is focused on this one little corner of society.
But here's the thing. Even in that seemingly limited social world, the characters are dealing with some really fundamental questions. How we see each other, what truth is, how to find happiness and connection, how societal rules shape our lives, like Charlotte Lucas, who accepts marriage as a necessity, not a romantic ideal.
So Pride and Prejudice might be on this relatable human scale and the Law of One on this vast cosmic scale, but they both explore the same complexities of experiencing reality. Whether it's shaped by social norms in psychology, like in Austen, or by the limits of consciousness in a specific density, like in the Law of One, the challenge of understanding and connecting, it's always there.
It's amazing how these totally different sources can illuminate the same things about being human. Pride and Prejudice digs deep into how social structures and biases affect our judgments and relationships, while the Law of One gives us this huge cosmic framework for understanding those same struggles as part of this bigger journey of spiritual evolution.
Yeah, they both offer a unique lens. And for you listening, maybe it's a chance to reflect on how these themes, judging others, becoming self aware, the ups and downs of love, the elusive nature of truth, how all of that plays out in your own life. Maybe thinking about these connections can help you reevaluate some of your own assumptions and how you see things.
So here's a final thought to chew on. In a world where sometimes society can feel as restrictive as Austen's time, and the true nature of reality is veiled as the Law of One describes, how do we find our own way to deeper understanding and those real, meaningful connections with others?
That's a powerful question to ponder.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope exploring Pride and Prejudice and the Law of One has given you some new insights, some food for thought. We love the sources you submit, so keep them coming. We'll catch you on the next exploration. See ya.